Hi, everyone. Welcome to Save the Date, your dating survival guide from Coffee Meets Bagel. I'm Dawoon, your host and CNB's Chief Dating Officer. Each episode, I invite a dating expert to explore what it takes to go on great dates and ultimately find a great relationship. I am really excited to have an amazing dating coach with me here today. Damona is not only a renowned dating coach who regularly shares her dating expertise on media outlets like the LA Times, the Washington Post, the Drew Barrymore Show, NPR, CNN. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. She has an amazing podcast as well, which now just celebrated 350 episodes. Am I right?
Yes.
Yeah. Damona, I'm so particularly excited to have you here today because one thing that I think is very unique about you than other dating coaches that I've interviewed is that you've spoken extensively about race and dating. And I know you also grew up in a family of interracial marriage. You have a white Jewish father and African American mother who's also in a different religious background. So I know that this is a topic that influenced and shaped you, and you've been thinking about a lot since you were small, which is really awesome. And I think navigating any kind of differences with our dates is very challenging, and particularly race because it can be a very sensitive topic. So thank you so much for joining us today to talk about this because it's a topic that I really want all the daters out there to feel confident about approaching. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. And I'm so excited because you were one of my first guests on the Dates and Mates podcast.
I
So it's like
know.
coming full circle. And honestly, this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, not just as a dating coach and helping people over the last 15 years navigate dating apps and all of the differences from education to religion to politics to race, but race in particular right now, I think we have an opportunity because we we are waking up in a way in
Hmm.
this country and understanding that we carry biases that aren't, it's not our fault. It's not something that we may be consciously continuing to perpetuate, but it's a world in which most of the people listening to this podcast grew up within, and we have an opportunity right now to examine that and the belief systems that we bring with us into all of our lives, but especially into our dating lives,
Hmm.
that may actually be getting in our way of being able to have deeper connections and
Hmm.
deeper cultural understanding.
Yeah, no, I could not agree with you more. I'm curious, uh, I want to start with kind of your childhood and growing up, like seeing the differences, your parents' background and how they actually navigated that difference. And I'm sure that kind of shaped your view as a dating coach. Could you share with us a little bit more about, what you've learned from your parents?
Yes, it's interesting because I really just became aware of the difference in the last year or so when I realized this is the lens that I've always looked at the world through.
Mm,
So always I would always ask my clients about their racial preferences or, cultural differences, and that's always been a part of my program, but it just became I just became aware in the last year that that's not always a part of the discussion. So I'm glad
right.
that I finally get a chance to speak on this. And I mean, my cultural background is, it's very layered. So my parents, they got together at a time when it was technically legal for a black and a white person to be together, but I grew up in the Midwest where it took an effort on both of their parts to choose to be in a relationship with one another.
Mm,
And I will not bore you or horrify you with all of the stories I've heard from my mother about looks they got, comments they got, just the way that they were really, really ostracized from in just having, or even in some cases actually physically attacked, like in
mm,
just being two people in love. And
mm.
so I think it's important to also remind ourselves of how far we've come in our
Yeah.
thought process over the last, 10, 20, 30, 40 years. But when you think about it, it's also not that far back. So we like to think
Yeah.
like, "Oh, we're all so woke now. We're so conscious." Like, I'm open-minded about this, but as you start to peel back the layers, you start to realize that there are choices that you make that, like, coming from a diverse background, the choices that I made in dating, I always dated race open.
Mm-hmm.
And that was because of the lens that I came from, and now my family is expanded out to my stepmother is Mexican American, my sister-in-law is Indian American, like, I have
Oh,
a
that's
real, like,
beautiful.
UN kind of family, and I would love to be able to pass on a little bit of that perspective to
Yeah.
people that don't have that same sort of, cultural experience that I've had.
Yeah. One of the main challenges that I see, and this was personal uh, for me too, and I see a lot of CMB daters go through is this um, when it comes to dating somebody with different backgrounds, whether it's race, religion, education, whatever. But I think particularly race, because it is a sensitive topic, there's this like element of fear present for those of us who are just like anything unfamiliar just can sometimes feel scary, right? And there is, I think also because of the current events um, and all the stuff that's going on, there's like this fear of making mistakes, fear of being stereotyped, fear of offending somebody, fear of being misunderstood, and which can be a huge barrier when it comes to our romantic life because dating and love is supposed to be like I need to feel safe, right? I need to feel safe to be myself. I need to feel safe to play and just like be open. And when I'm kind of thinking about all this, like, okay, like, am I gonna then it's hard to be myself. And I can kind of see how this can be a huge barrier for those of us who are, even wanting to date somebody of different backgrounds. Like, oh, okay, it just feels too uncomfortable. Like, how do we actually get over that?
I see more than the fear of crossing a racial barrier, I see a lack of understanding of where our dating preferences come from. And
Mm,
that's what I'm interested in unpacking with my clients and dates and mates listeners is I use this business technique that you might know called the 5 whys.
mm-hmm,
And I start with what is the belief system that you have? So it would be strange to date someone of a different racial background, or I I only want to date people who are from my same racial background. Whatever the belief system is, we start with that. And then we ask why. And the first layer is usually like, oh, let's just say it's I don't date, and I've heard this. So I'll just use an example. I don't date black men.
mm-hmm,
Okay, why? Well, I never have. Why? And then we start to look at the underlying reasons for your decision making. And usually it's because of either our confirmation bias, we continue to be attracted to things that are familiar, and it's like you were saying, it's safe because we know it. It's a known entity, or it's just because we literally never even thought about it. It's just something that we culturally were sort of pushed into, or because of the social circle that we have, because of all of these things are interrelated, because of our education level, because of where we live, because of uh how much money we've made. And when you actually look at those underlying factors, you start to realize that actually many of them are built upon or or correlated with race in a way that many people have never examined
mm-hmm,
before this magical time in history, where
mm,
we're being asked to examine that and understand, even just like we look at relationships in the media. We look at Meghan and Harry, and it's like, well, why can't Prince Archie be called Prince? Well,
mm-hmm.
why? Well, we just can't. And this is not tradition. Wait a minute. We have to stop and we have to ask why. And to unpeel those layers, that's when some really interesting self discovery can come through.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. Whatever feels unfamiliar feels strange and um, awkward. And I mean, even last episode, I was talking to an expert about sex and even conversation about sex. Like, if you're just not used to doing that, that feels sometimes it could feel wrong. It feels embarrassing. So then you end up like not doing it even more. And so it's kind of like a vicious circle, which is why I think diversity is like so important. But that's the topic for another day. So I love that technique, five whys, why, ask. And then, I mean, probably ultimately we realize, as everyone does, we carry biases based on our background and upbringing. And so then I realized that. And if I'm somebody who's like, you know what, like I really want to, the only way out is to actually be like, go out there and familiarize yourself. And so for your dating clients who's actually never dated outside of like, right, different race, religion, whatever that is, and they're kind of trying to do that for the first time, like what are some things that you share with the client to help them navigate that better? Because it does feel unfamiliar.
It can feel unfamiliar, and it I mean, I actually feel like the whole process of dating is an exercise in facing fears and moving past them, and be you have to really be brave to be your authentic self. So that is really what the core of what I try to get people to do, to bring their authentic self into dating. So if your authentic self can say, I have a dating preference for, let's say, for white men, but you would not say I am racially biased. We have to look at that and reframe that. And if you believe that you are a person who does not operate with racial bias, then you are going to have to expand your parameters to experience something different in order to um in order to reframe that belief, because people will tell me, well, I'm just not attracted to Asian men, say. And if we really look at it, it's like, well, you're attracted to that which is familiar to you. And so if you've never actually dated an Asian man, how could you say that you're never attracted? And people will always tell me like, well, on the surface, that person wasn't the kind of person that I would date, and not for racial reasons, but that person didn't seem like my type, right? And then when I started talking to them, I realized we had a lot in common, and we really could connect. And I'll actually bring this back to my parents, because you look at the surface, their stories could not be more different. They come from very different worlds, but they were able to connect on a certain level. One, just from also both being sort of othered in their culture, because my dad is Jewish and in grew up in a place where there weren't a lot of Jews. My mom was one of the first first Black children to attend a previously segregated school in Detroit at a time when things were still very, very racially charged. So they could bond through their otherness, and they could also bond through their strong cultural identity. And I find that we have more similarities than we have differences. So what I try to encourage my clients to do when they're going to a date with somebody from a different background, and it's maybe something new, to look for the similarities. I feel like most people, you probably have experienced this too with at Coffee Meets Bagel, people are looking for reasons to say no rather than reasons to say yes, and we have to completely flip that ratio.
Mm, I love that. Yeah, when you focus on similarities, I mean, whatever you focus on, whatever your energy goes to, like that's where, what that's what you're gonna see. And if you your focus is on like how different we look and all that, then it's gonna feel very distant. But if you actually start focusing on what you can find something that is common, I'm sure there are plenty of things also that you can find um, that is that you two have in common as well, that you can use to create that bond and connection. So I really, really love that tip. Would you say if I'm somebody who, let's say like I'm meeting somebody for the first time, like, it's very, very early in dating. And I have this, because it's unfamiliar, I have this thing that like, oh, this fear of like, okay, maybe I don't want to say anything wrong. I don't want to offend anyone. Like it's better to just kind of, even though it's early in the relationship, maybe even if it's like first or second date, to kind of share that and vocalize that, that you have this worry, uh it's kind of like naming the fear, so that it's kind of out there, and it's not something that you're like thinking about constantly in the back of your mind, probably, which probably actually the other person is going to sense something. Is that a typical kind of, is that a good advice, would you say?
In general, yes. I say my phrasing for that is own the elephant in the room. If there's something
Mm-hmm.
that's just so obvious, it's going to sit on the table between the two of you the entire time, you should voice it. What what I advise everyone of all backgrounds as they are engaging in this process of crossing racial barriers is to try to try to accept that we are going to make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And as people are being more people are being brought into the conversation on race, just the acknowledgement that a desire to understand each other is enough to get started.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, even I'm in a relationship with a white man, which I guess some would call an interracial relation. I don't even know when you go from like a mixed race background, but we have conversations on race. Even we've been together for 17 years, and there are still conversations that come up around race that I realize he sees from a different lens than I do. And I rather than looking at it, if you are coming to the table with the right intention, it's not he's not trying to offend me. Even if I am offended, it is not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily an intent to offend. And so it does require people of all backgrounds to be willing to accept a certain level of people fumbling through the process of learning, but approaching it from a perspective of I want to understand. And
Mm-hmm.
and that does require people on all sides to speak up too. Like if something happens and you're like, that made me feel a little bit uncomfortable. Or, I'll hear a lot from Black women and Asian women. They are afraid sometimes to date people of different backgrounds who might make them feel fetishized.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's like, I'm attracted to you because of your race.
Mm-hmm.
That's
Mm-hmm.
not sexy. So
Mm-hmm.
anyone thinking like it's a compliment to say you look so exotic or like I or something like sexual, like I love to see your black skin and my white skin together is
Oh my
not
God.
sexy, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Because it brings us back to that place of pain and fear of being singled out because of our race.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think you can understand what I'm talking
Oh
about.
yeah, 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 yeah. Um, I'm glad so glad you mentioned that for those of us who are, I think what you said is so true, which is come to the table with the intention to understand and acknowledge the fact that like whatever your background is, just because we just grew up in we're different people, right? We're different people. There's no way that you can actually see things from my perspective and vice versa. So with anything, again, just not just about race, with anything, there's always a possibility of saying something that you for you is like doesn't occur to you as anything, but maybe matters to people because of their experiences growing up. And so acknowledging that there is going to be this like fumbling process, and that's okay. And that's okay. I think that's such a critical point. Um, for if something like that happens, like I don't know, your date said something, and then you're like, it took you back to a place where, yeah, like memories of being singled out because of how I look and skin, color of my skin and whatever. Um, can we actually help our daters for those of us who have experienced that and you want to vocalize, but you don't really know how to do that, how to bring that up to the other person? What kind of help can we provide them?
I actually like to use Breanne Brown has this technique about like the story I'm telling myself is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that is really a useful tool because
Mm.
it's not pointing to the other person and saying, "You said this racist thing and now I'm offended," right?
Yeah.
Because that's automatically going to put someone on the defense. And what I'm
Yeah.
really interested in is using this conversation to bridge gaps between us. So if you start with like, when I hear that, it makes me feel this. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think you intend it to sound that way, but I just want to acknowledge that's how it makes me feel, or that's the way I'm hearing it.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
pause. This is a
Mm.
really good technique for any uncomfortable conversation you have to have in dating.
Mm-hmm.
Pause is a very powerful tool that a lot of times we neglect to use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We barrel through because we're uncomfortable, we don't know what the other person's going to say, we're afraid of what the other person might say, and we just push through the pause, trying to get to the other side and assume again what the other person must be thinking.
Right.
So see what happens if you let the pause land and see how they come back to the table. You might get a really thoughtful and unexpected response.
Right, right, right. Like I'm not good with pauses because that also is something that I'm not used to, right? And then I feel the need to like fill the gap here because it's awkward. And so that's something definitely that that requires practice, and it's so necessary. Yeah, because I think when we're nervous, we just tend to go on and on and on. And we don't actually give the other person an opportunity to share with their story and what happened and how they kind of saw things play out. And so that is a very, very good tip. I like the phrase. Can you say that again one more time? The
The story I'm telling myself
Mhm.
is whatever you're thinking.
Right.
Because you can own your feelings, you can own how you feel. You can't manipulate an outcome. Well, you can, but you probably won't like it. You can't control how the other person responds to that.
Right.
So that allows you to own what's in your head and what you're feeling, and that you can put it in your own words. How this is making me feel like this, or when I hear that, I think, feel, understand this. And you can then say, I'm not sure that's how you intended it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But try to come to it from the perspective of looking to bridge misunderstanding. And believe me, I coach a lot of Black women, and I hear, I hosted a show called #Black Love through A&E Networks, and a lot of the women that I work with will say like, but I'm tired. I'm really tired
Mm-hmm.
of explaining
Mm-hmm.
Black culture. I don't want to be re-traumatized by
Mm-hmm.
having these discussions. And that's fine. Like anything that we are saying here, you can choose or choose not to engage with.
Mm-hmm.
But I personally feel that through my own cultural experience, my life has grown richer and I have gained more understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And for my life, that works. For many of my clients' lives, that works. You can choose to not engage in this way, and that's your choice. But if you are interested in the discovery, whatever your experience is, you have to be willing to come to the table. And
Mm-hmm.
there are going to be situations where you're going to come to the table with someone who's not as aware of the conversation as you are, as not as equipped for a difficult conversation. Like I'll on my show, I'm always like telling my listeners how to date from their best self, and they're like,
Mm.
but why? Like other people aren't doing this. People are like half-assing their profiles. They don't understand about flirting techniques. They don't understand that. It's like you can't control that element,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
you can
yeah.
show up as your best self with the invitation for the other person to do the same.
Yeah, I love that. And I think when we don't, and sometimes we feel tired, like like your client, what your clients shared, I think is very valid. And maybe we need to take a break, like like that, like you said, that is our choice. But if we really want to get what we want, which is thriving, like fulfilling, amazing long-term relationship, right? If we are not bringing our best selves, how can we actually make that possible? And I really do believe like not everyone is doing that, but when we actually come across the right person who's also trying to be the best selves, and like your parents who actually chose to do the work to create whatever they had, which I'm sure was a lot of work, but what you get as an ultimate result of that is something amazing and beautiful, right? And I'm sure ultimately, like all that work that we put in pays off in a beautiful relationship that that really like takes things to the next level for yourself and for the other person and for the yeah, for both of you. So yeah, that is a really, really great point. Um, for this makes me think about, okay, so when we start dating somebody with different backgrounds, and more difference there is, of course there will be more work that we have to choose to engage to kind of to bridge the difference. However, there are a lot of exciting things, like I think half the fun of dating really is to getting to know somebody who's a stranger, really, essentially, and getting to know them and learning from their experiences, and experiencing something different in you that you never did because the other person is bringing that to the table. I think that's kind of like half the fun. And so can we could you share more about like what your, as you observed, like with your parents, like I'm sure there are tons of fun things that actually happen because they actually came from such a different backgrounds. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Well, I look at it as getting access to different worlds. I have the key to many different worlds and experiences, and like even I'll talk about it from the perspective of, say, my sister-in-law, whose family, they grew up in India. Her parents grew up in India. They had an arranged marriage,
Mm,
completely different, cultural experience. And that's a world that I otherwise would probably know nothing about, have no access to, but through her marrying into my family, I get to experience a home cooked Bengali meal. I get to understand different cultural nuances that are are, are I would not otherwise get to experience. And then I get to build my life with that new knowledge. I get to say, "Oh, is that a cultural norm that I actually would like to experience?" I'll take it
mm-hmm,
also back to religion and Judaism, which is not a racial background, but is a strong cultural experience. And we get to borrow from that in our Jewish heritage. And now that I have children, I've chosen for them to be be at least culturally Jewish. I'm still
mm-hmm.
working on the religious part. But, like, I really like I like the Shabbat ritual. I
Yeah.
like Friday nights lighting candles and saying a prayer and talking about our week and having family time and getting off of devices on Saturday and powering down. And, I can take the elements of a lot of these different cultural experiences and build the life that I want from it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure there are some people who, there are different extremes that you can go to. And I think, there was a time when a lot of these boundaries were much d more difficult to cross.
Mm-hmm.
But that is what I feel is the most exciting thing about this time of life that we're living through, this time in history where a lot of these barriers are being stripped away, and we get to look at the core of of human beings, and what we have in common over what we have different. And we get, and there's a whole conversation I'm sure that could be made about cultural appropriation, but I don't look at it in that way. I look at it in the way of cultural access. Like, I get
Mm,
to celebrate and experience what is great about so many different cultures because of the world that I've built for myself.
yeah, that's so beautiful. And your life is so much richer, like as a result of that, right? And fuller. And at the end of the day, like, isn't that what all of us want, right? Like a richer and fuller life, that we get to live one life. And
Yes.
that is ultimately also why we want to be in a relationship, right? Because it does, it's an element that can make your life richer and fuller, and like really push you to grow and think in different perspectives. Like, I love the Shabbat culture myself. I actually got to experience it recently because I was staying at a Jewish household. They invited me to their Shabbat dinner on Friday, and I was like, wow, this is so beautiful. It was like, and it was like their grandparents, the parent, and the kids, all kind of getting together over, and they did it. I was there for a few Fridays, and they do it every Friday, and there's certain food that I thought it was really amazing, and something that I definitely thought about, like, okay, how can
Yeah.
I actually, I'm not like, we don't have a Jewish members in our family, but it's such a great tradition.
Yeah, and the
uh,
food, you brought up the food. I mean, I get to eat, like, so many different kinds of foods.
yeah.
I think, it's that's really what it is. It's sort of like, just having access to sample different experiences. And I think it's important in this discussion to also talk about the experiences of people of color on
Mm-hmm.
dating apps, because a
Mm-hmm.
lot of times I get asked about that. There's like, 10-year-old data from OkCupid that people will cite and say, but Black women and Asian men have the hardest time on dating apps. I know you're familiar with, and I then I ask, "Well, how come all of the Black women and Asian men that I've coached over the last 15 years do not have that experience?"
Mm,
And I've realized that it is about this expanding of parameters, and and in the approach to be able to um evaluate dates for what they let me say this a different way. It's when you expand your dating parameters and then you start looking at what are the qualities that really matter.
mm-hmm.
If my pool is not limited by race or religion or culture, and it's really honed in on some of the things you've talked about on the show before, the qualities that you want in a partner, the life that you're trying to build, and then we develop a strategy to really filter for that,
Mm,
and seek that out and be proactive in love, so that, look, if there's somebody that doesn't want to date you because of your culture, I'm not saying like you should chase and
yeah.
push like engage with me please,
Yeah.
but for those who are open to it, I think there are different ways to use dating apps as a tool to bridge connection. I mean, if
Yeah.
you even think about, the time before Coffee Meets Bagel, you only had access to people who were in your social circle. You only got to have a date with someone if they went to your school, if you worked with them, if your mom knew them, if they lived in your neighborhood, if you went to church with them. That was your dating pool. And I I just am so grateful for the technology to be able to bridge this gap, and
Mm-hmm.
for you for creating a tool that really enables people to step outside of their closed circle and see what else might be out there.
Yeah, I mean, that actually is one of the points that I really take pride on. The fact that we are enabling people to be able to go outside of their usual circle, and access people that they've never would have met, right? They really never would have met if not for Coffee Meets Bagel or other dating apps. And I think that is like for sure one wonderful phenomenon that technology has enabled for us. And really happy to know that, like, again, like, because I think that makes your life like richer and fuller. And um, really like that's like ultimately the point of our life, right?
Right. And there's
The
been an increase also in interracial relationships, a major increase in interracial relationships since the advent of dating apps. So that to me says that people are embracing this, and whether it's something you're consciously doing or just something that because of dating apps you are able to explore when you otherwise wouldn't have. I still I think it's a good thing. And also successive relationships is also increasing. So
right.
when you're finding somebody really that it's not just when you widen your dating pool and you find someone with whom you can really connect on a values and goals
Yeah,
and communication level, then really those relationships ultimately are more stable and are richer
right.
and can grow over time.
Right. I think this is such an important point. So I want to like delve in a little bit more. In one of the articles that you wrote on the Washington Post, you quote one matchmaker who says, eliminating an entire race of people truly limits one's potential to date and find a life partner. And we're not even talking about just race, like eliminating entire whatever of people um, uh, really truly limits one's potential to date and find a lifetime partner. Like because all the 90% of CMB daters are really looking for that thriving long-term relationship. I think it's really important that we get this, like, why is it excluding like certain group of people for whatever that is really limits like my potential to find a great lifetime partner.
Yeah, limiting like men under five
Or
5'11",
certain height,
right?
education, whatever. Yeah, we've all done that. Yeah.
I mean, I will do I'll literally do dating pool math with my clients. And I'm like, "Okay, here are all the people who are available to you." And then we look at what are those things on the list that then start to shape the pool that you have available to you. And all those things that we've talked about before. It could be religion, um, it could be location, and then oftentimes it is race. That to me, that's sort of the last vestige of of old dating habits where we hide behind this. Well, it's just my preference. Well, I'm not attracted to someone of that race. Well, I've just never dated someone. Well, my dad wouldn't approve if I brought home somebody who was another race. And I like to just unpack that with my clients and get them to understand what what is really most important to you. Like, I was working with an Indian woman who said that she wanted to find an Indian man, and we
Mhm.
did the 5 whys. And at the end of the day, we came to the conclusion that her relationship with her dad was the most important thing in her life, or her
Mm,
relationship with her parents. And then times when she had dated outside of her race and culture, her it damaged her relationship with her dad.
mm,
And
mm,
that
mm,
was not the life that she wanted to build. I'm
mm.
never going to push anybody to just say, like, just date outside your race, date someone of a different religion, because I know what you're signing up for. You are signing up for a lot of challenging discussions. But I think we grow through challenge. We
Mhm,
grow through these kind of conversations that we're having. And you have an opportunity right now using Coffee Meets Bagel, using dating apps. You have an opportunity to expand your worldview and engage in some of these conversations. For me, that makes me want to lean in. There might be
mhm,
some people listening here who want to lean out and tap out from this discussion. But I just I find that the a lot of these a lot of these belief systems that we put in place, whether it is height or race or religion, it's it's not our stuff. It's
Mhm.
actually stuff that's been passed down from our parents, from our great
Society.
grandparents, from
Mhm.
society. And when we actually step back and look at it and examine, wait, does that actually matter that much to me? Like, and I'm as guilty as anybody. Like I had must have a 4-year college degree. Like must, absolutely must. But now, and my husband does have a 4-year college degree, but when I step back from that, I think, why was that so important to me? Like, what did that signify to me? Because of the way that I was brought up, to me, that signified a certain level of intelligence, that's a certain level of ability to provide, right? And actually, those two things are not as correlated as they were in my mind at that
Mhm.
time. But because of the way that I was brought up and the value my parents placed on education, I carried that with me into my
Mhm.
dating life.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, and I think, you mentioned the dating math, right? Like we can choose to this is all dating is personal, right? So we all make personal choices when it comes to choosing somebody we want to date. But if we choose to kind of ignore certain group because of like what our society told us that was important and whatever, then I think it's important to aware of like what is it costing, what could it be potentially costing us, right, in our dating life. Well, ultimately in a partnership, really the things that are important is like, does this person like really can they make me feel really understood and be loved and be seen, and like vice versa. Like, well, height is not going to do that for you. Like you just know, we just all know that, right? Yeah, like college degree is not going to do that for you. We know that in our head. And so when we start actually adding all these filters that doesn't really have anything to do with those important elements, well, there's like, we're going to end up with a smaller pool that doesn't allow us to actually be able to choose based on things that really matter. And so I think it's so important for us to be aware of that when we're making our personal dating choices.
Yes, you totally hit the nail on the head. And that's when people have done that, that's when I get the call from somebody who's saying, I'm looking around and seeing everybody else living the life that I want to have. And I don't know why. I don't know why it passed me by. And I'm doing all the things. I'm listening to Dates and Mates podcast. I'm listening to Save the Date. I don't understand, Damona. I'm doing the things. And a lot of times, what we've been talking about today is really big, right? But a lot of times these shifts are very nuanced. It might just be one small change in your parameters. Like again, I'll use my own experience, and I could tell a million other stories of clients who limited their parameters. But I was only looking to date men who were a year to 10 years older.
Mm.
Why? I don't know. I had a belief. I had a belief, and I wish someone had five wide me about it. I had a belief that I was mature for my age and I needed to date men who were more mature. Or like maybe if we step back even from, we look at the media and the relationship role models I saw, and it was always, this older man and a younger woman. So I just had this idea. And I almost missed my husband on a dating app because
Mm.
we are the same age. So he
Mm.
wasn't coming up in any of my searches. And then finally he reached out to me. We met like old ages ago in in old dating site systems. And he reached out to me and I looked at his profile and I'm like, this guy's perfect. This is the guy. Why? And I'm like racking my brain trying to figure out why I didn't why I didn't date
Right.
this guy. And then I realized it's because I had excluded him from all of my searches. I had
Mm.
excluded him from my parameters, and he was literally everything that I was looking for, except we were the same age.
Right. Oh
And
my
I've
God,
just seen
goodness.
people do this so many times, and I'm so thankful that he said he even took a beat and was like, should I reach out to her? Because I don't know, we're the same age and she said she's not looking for someone my age,
Right.
but it's 1 year. And he was like, what the hell? I'll just send her a message. And so people will come to me and say, well, I can't find anybody. Everyone my age wants to date someone younger or whatever that belief system is that we carry into it, and I just
Right.
strip that away and I say, just what if that wasn't true? What if whatever you're thinking right now is not accurate? And what if you just expanded by 2 inches or 2 years or 10 years or whatever thing it is that may be just truncating your dating pool? Or what if you
Right.
just check one more box on that, the racial preferences, and just see who comes in? And studies have shown that people will respond if they're attracted to your photo and what you've said in your profile. They'll still respond, and I'm sure you have plenty of data on this as
Mm-hmm.
well,
Mm-hmm.
even if it's a little bit outside of
Yeah.
the parameters. And so I just want to encourage people to just see what happens. And I got tons of hate mail um for that Washington Post article. I got tons of hate mail. Somebody tried to hack my website.
Oh my
I mean,
goodness.
I trolls upon trolls upon trolls, which I can handle because I'm a woman of color, a Jewish woman of color in America. I can handle it. It's nothing I haven't been through before. But, I also got messages from some people who said, because of your article, I changed my dating preferences, and
Mm,
I realized that my dating preferences were not in alignment actually with my values, and I didn't understand why I checked that box. I just
mm,
never had. And now I'm dating a Black woman, I'm dating an Asian man. I expanded my parameters, and I'm so glad I did it, because ultimately I'm meeting new people who are making my life richer, or who I'm moving into relationships with, who otherwise were not in my circle. And
right.
that makes it worth every piece of hate mail I've gotten.
That's so beautiful, Damona. And I was telling in an earlier conversation, really like not there are not that many dating coaches who actually like are able to talk about this, or who's willing to talk about navigating differences, particularly race, because it is a very emotionally charged topic. And but it's such an important one for I think for us to talk about, and something that could really help a lot of us, our daters out there who are thinking about or dealing with um, this topic. So thank you so much for engaging in this conversation with me. Um, okay, so the time flew by. One final question I ask every Save the Date guest: what is the best dating advice you've ever received?
I've ever received. Oh, I think it's be yourself.
Mm.
Everybody else is already taken. And honestly,
I love that.
once I stepped into my own authenticity, I think, I saw these visions and of what was attractive and who was dateable, and tried to assimilate into that, and was always frustrated then. But when I really came to the table as my authentic self, that's when I was really able to
Mm.
feel more comfortable and also find love.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. And I think we talked about the importance of, we're laughing and like joking about being yourself and whatever, but we both like know that it's not easy, right? And it's not easy leaning into the discomfort. It's not easy leaning into the unfamiliar territories. And so I just want to acknowledge all the daters out there, who are every day like putting yourself out there, trying to be authentic, and trying something different that we haven't tried before. It all takes a lot of work and a lot of courage, and it's certainly not easy, even though we know that that's kind of what is going to get us what we want, which is that thriving, fulfilling long-term relationship. So I want to acknowledge all the daters out there as well. Thank you so much, Damona, for joining me this week. Uh, oh yeah, one more question. Where can they find you if they want to stay connected with you, ask any questions? Yeah, your podcast, could you share all of that good stuff?
Yes. Please stay connected to me, and please send me questions. I take them every week on Dates and Mates. I have a segment called Dear Damona, and then I also have a column in the LA Times by the same Same name. So you can find all that at datesandmates.com, or you can find me on social at Damona Hoffman.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's please stay connected with Damona. And as a reminder for our audience, we will have all the show notes of the episode on our blog, coffeemeetsbagel.com/blog. And we will see you in a few weeks. Thank you. Thanks everyone for joining.